The most spiritually active person in the room is often the one furthest from feeling God's love. Not because God moved, not because their faith collapsed, but because of something almost nobody explains. When a receiver is damaged, turning the volume up doesn't help. It makes the static worse. You know this feeling even if you've never put words to it. You've been to the service, you've opened the Bible with real intention, maybe even with desperation. You've pushed through worship when your chest felt like it was made of concrete. You've said the right words and waited for warmth to follow, like pressing your hand against a cold stove and expecting your palm to heat it. And somewhere, without a single dramatic decision, you started building your spiritual life on something other than connection. You started building it on presence, on performance, on surviving Sunday. If that's where you are, exhausted from trying to feel something you can't feel, this is not a video about trying harder. It's a video about why trying harder is the exact wrong response, and what church hurt actually did structurally to your capacity to receive God's love. Because once you understand that, the path back becomes specific, and specific is the only kind of path that actually leads somewhere. Here is what almost no one tells you about healing from church hurt. The reason you can't feel God's love right now probably has very little to do with God, and very little to do with your spiritual effort. It has everything to do with something that happened to your capacity for receptivity. And the harder you push against a structural problem with spiritual performance, the more you risk reinforcing the damage you're trying to undo. That's not discouragement, that's the beginning of the real answer. Think about an old radio with a bent antenna. The signal is still being broadcast, the station hasn't gone silent, but the receiver took damage somewhere, knocked over, worn down, twisted in a way it was never designed to handle. And what do people do when the radio crackles with static instead of music? They shake it, they hit the side, they turn the volume up, they push buttons that have never worked before. None of it helps because the problem isn't the signal, the problem is structural, and structural problems require structural repair, not more force applied to the wrong place. Church hurt is what bent your antenna. Not a crisis of faith, not spiritual immaturity, not abandonment by God. The signal never stopped broadcasting. But something happened in a community that was supposed to be safe, in a place that was supposed to represent love, that damaged your receiver in a precise and specific way. And until you understand exactly how it was damaged, you can't repair it. There are 3 specific mechanisms through which church hurt damages the soul's capacity to receive love. Not 12, not a vague cluster of wounds. 3, they operate like kinks in a wire, not catastrophic breaks, but precise bends that interrupt the signal before it reaches you. The first is shame. Not the healthy kind that leads to growth. The kind that translates rejection into verdict, that whispers, "I was cast out because I deserved it." When the people who were supposed to represent God excluded you or assigned you a category of unworthiness, part of you processed that as spiritual truth rather than human failure. And what this creates is a filter. Every transmission of love that tries to reach you passes through that filter first. The filter says, "This can't be for me." So the signal arrives, but your receiver translates it as static. The second is suspicion. After you've experienced love used as leverage, love that came with conditions, love that was withdrawn when you didn't perform well enough, love that turned out to be control wearing a kind face, your nervous system learns something. It learns that warmth is what precedes manipulation. That openness is vulnerability waiting to be exploited. This isn't weakness, it's intelligence. It's your system protecting you from the thing that already caused the damage. But the cost is real. Now even genuine love triggers a question. What does this cost? When will this be turned against me? The antenna bends again. The third is identity displacement. When a community tells you, explicitly or through what they did, who you are, and that message is degrading, you face an impossible choice: reject their verdict or absorb it. And most people, when rejection comes from a spiritual authority they trusted, absorb more of it than they realize. They begin carrying an identity that was handed to them inside the wound. I am the one who was cast out. I am the one they didn't want. I am the one even God didn't seem to protect. That identity sits between you and everything that follows, including love, including scripture, including every moment of potential connection with God. 3 bends in the wire, 3 reasons the signal can't get through. And here's what all 3 have in common: none of them are healed by effort. Each one requires something different, a specific, small reorientation. And that reorientation is exactly what the Psalms offer if you know how to read them. This is where David becomes the most counterintuitive spiritual teacher in all of Scripture. Most people read the Psalms as raw emotional outbursts, and they are that, but they're also something else, something most people miss entirely. The Psalms are not striving documents. David did not try harder to feel God's love. He did not force himself through numbness until the warmth returned. He did not clean himself up before approaching God. What David did was bring his exact condition, unfiltered, unperformed, without improvement, to the one who could meet him in it. Psalm 22 opens with abandonment. My God, why have you forsaken me? That is not a man who prepared a polished prayer. That is a man who walked in with everything broken and said, "This is what I have, take it." And in the meeting between his raw condition and God's actual presence, something happened. Not immediately, not through effort, through encounter. The kind of encounter that only happens when you stop performing the connection and let it be real. The Psalms are receiver repair documents. They don't repair the receiver by demanding more from it. They repair it by giving it a safe place to be exactly what it is, damaged and all. And here's the part that may be uncomfortable to sit with for a moment. Each of those three damage mechanisms, shame, suspicion, identity displacement, has a sound you can recognize right now, not in theory, in your actual experience this week. Shame sounds like I want to pray, but I feel like I need to be in a better place first, like I haven't earned the right to approach yet. Suspicion sounds like I've read this scripture before, it felt real once, I don't fully trust that it still applies to me. Identity displacement sounds like maybe this works for other people, maybe it just doesn't reach me the same way. Those sentences, or some version of them, are the bent wire speaking. They feel like self-awareness, they feel like honesty, but they are the sound of a structural problem, not a faith problem, and knowing the difference matters enormously, because when you know precisely where the wire is bent, you know precisely where the repair needs to happen. There is a version of this journey where the receiver gets so damaged that even your prayers feel hollow, where you open the Bible and feel nothing, not even the comfortable numbness, but something worse, the quiet suspicion that maybe the connection was never quite real for you. That is not a spiritual verdict, that is a receiver at its most compromised. And what is astonishing about the Psalms is that David describes that exact state. I cry out, but you do not answer, not as an accusation, as a condition, as the honest reality he brought to God without dressing it up first. If that's where you are, if your prayers feel like they're dissolving into silence, like sending a signal that never lands, you are not further from God than everyone else. You are in exactly the right place to be met, because that is the condition the Psalms were written for. 3 practices, one for each damage mechanism, drawn from Psalms 22, 34, and 139. Each takes less than 5 minutes. None of them requires you to feel anything first. That last part is not a small detail. The practices are not designed to generate feeling. They're designed to create the conditions in which feeling becomes possible again. They work with the grain of how the soul heals, not against it with forced effort. From Psalm 22, the practice of voice desolation. Not polished prayer, the exact opposite. You bring your worst-case condition to God in words, unimproved, without solutions attached, without the performance of hopefulness. You name the desolation as precisely as you can, the way David did at the opening of that psalm, and you leave it there. This practice addresses shame directly, because shame survives on secrecy and on the belief that your actual state is spiritually unacceptable. When you voice your worst condition to God and are not destroyed, when the silence that follows is not punishment, the filter begins to lift. Slowly, but it lifts. From Psalm 34, the practice of magnification in the dark. Before you feel anything in the present, you name something specific that was true of God in a previous moment, not a general declaration of faith. A particular concrete moment you can actually name, where something held when it should have broken, where something arrived when it should have stayed absent. You magnify that specific thing. This practice repairs suspicion because it creates evidence. Love preceded this silence, which means this silence is not the whole story. Which means suspicion's logic has a hole in it. From Psalm 139, the practice of located identity. You read Psalm 139 slowly, not as a theological statement, but as a personal address. You pay specific attention to the phrases that conflict most sharply with the identity you were handed in the community that hurt you. You let that conflict exist. You don't resolve it immediately. You hold both, what they said you were and what this says you are. This practice addresses identity displacement not through force, but through consistent exposure to a different, older, prior voice. The voice that named you before anyone in that building ever had the chance. These 3 practices are not a program, they are a posture. a way of standing at a specific angle where the signal is most likely to reach a damaged receiver. The path back to feeling God's love again after church hurt is not the path of the person who pushes harder. It is the path of the person who brings exactly what they have, no more, no less, to the God who was never the source of the wound. The signal is still broadcasting, it has not dimmed, it has not reassigned you. What happened is that your receiver took damage from people who used spiritual belonging as a tool for harm. That damage is real and it deserves acknowledgement, not minimization. But it is not permanent, and it is not who you are. You are not the person who was cast out. You are the person being invited right now in exactly this condition to bring your bent receiver to the only one who knows precisely how to repair it. There's one more question worth sitting with, not today, but in the weeks ahead. When the receiver heals, when you begin to feel God's love again without forcing it, what do you do with what you know about the community that caused the damage? That answer is different for everyone. It's worth taking seriously without rushing it, because church hurt healing doesn't always mean returning to what broke you. Sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is start again somewhere that never told you that you were less.